Hello, Internet. We are back, and I must tell you, I'm excited. I know it's boring. I always say I'm excited. But you know what? I've met a very special woman, got a very special person here as a guest. And let me explain where we started. A few weeks ago, we had HP Ferreira, Hapje, as some people call him, 6'1" Mech member. If you've watched the video, you would know what I'm talking about. If you didn't watch it, please go and look at that video. I'll put the links here in the description as well. Basically, they were attacking a Swapo base called Smokeshell. Their rattles got shot out. He got wounded very badly. In fact, he was dead. And then he came alive again. He was for 2 days out of it. I told his parents that he wasn't really that seriously injured. They got quite a shock when they saw him. And even today, 42 years later, HP is still suffering. And we're appealing to all of you, please, if it's possible for you to look at this video, contribute in some way. Financially will work, advice will work. But if you have advice, if you know doctors or people who can advise, don't contact HP directly. The man has to, focus on his recovery and his son and on his wife, wonderful woman that as well, children. So Andrew Whittaker of 61 Meg will be taking care of the correspondence. You will see it. It was in my last SITREP, and I will put it in other SITREPs as well. I'll leave Andrew's Whittaker's details here as well.
Good morning once again. Just to give some feedback on the HP legacy conversation of about 10 days ago. From a 6-1 Mech Veterans Association point of view, the video has been successfully viewed by more than 5,000 people. From a fundraising point of view, our backup buddy received donations of about 18,000 in the first 2 days, but it's since gone quiet. One of the other positives from the video is the number of people that have contacted us regarding medical contacts they have, and we just feel that going forward, I will be the contact person. So any medical contacts, medical people, are welcome to contact me. We don't want to have HP pressurized all the time. I have most of the information. So I could be contacted on my cell at 0711 880202. WhatsApp would be great. Or my email, witbr@iafrica.com, witbr@iafrica.com. Thank you.
So let us continue, because I had like a psychologist type of person there with him in that video, and I saw what she was doing. And a lot of the 6-1 Mech people called me privately. And they said, Chris, I have to talk to this woman. She's like an angel. She even looks like one, actually. So, what we have here is Nicole Dickson. Nikki, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming along. I just want to tell you people as well, she said to me she might take a spot here on Legacy also. I don't know how long. She's a busy person, very busy person. We'll have to ask her husband, I suppose, as well. But she said she will try and record all the females, the female, the wives, the family members, the children, bring us that angle as well, because it's important, and I'm going to ask her why it's important. But first, Nikki, very welcome. Tell me, where do you come from?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris, for this opportunity. I live in the Kempton Park area at the moment with my husband Graham, who's a 61 Mech veteran himself, border war veteran. We've been married for 31 years and have two children, Courtney, who's a pharmacist in Cape Town, and our son Luke, who is a soldier in the British Army. So basically, for the last 25 years, I've been working in church communities, faith communities, involved with pastoral care, pastorale sorg. Ek is eintlik 'n pastorale therapeut, and I've just been listening to stories and people's stories and kind of walking that journey with people. yeah, for the last 25 years, and it's been very, very rewarding. And so the kind of the main elements that I really enjoy journeying with people is about their stories, their experiences. Sometimes it's a problem saturated story, and we look at that. We look at the effects of people's lives stories on their spirituality and their stories of faith, which is a very significant part for me, and kind of separates the secular psychology from the pastoral therapy. That's really important in the line of work that I do. And I'm particularly interested in the significance of rituals and ceremonies, you know, the importance of those in people's lives. So whether it's the sacrament of communion, or how we say goodbye to people, how we end chapters in our lives. So that's quite an important focus for me.
But how do you start on such a journey? What happened? Did something click in your life?
I was studying psychology, and I was introduced to narrative therapy, which is a postmodern way of thinking, coming alongside people and inherently believing that each person has within themselves the inner resources and abilities to cope with whatever life throws at them. They sometimes get forgotten or kind of overtaken by an element of a problem or something that's not working well for them. So there's that element, but then bringing into more sort of the secular psychology, it's not possible, I don't think, to separate a person's spirituality, their religious life, their religious stories, their faith stories, from their body and mind well-being either. And so it was just a natural course for me that this is something I need to follow, to find ways to really weave the two together, hence the pastoral.
This is an interesting field, but does this mean that the patient, if I can call him a patient, does that mean that these people also have to have a firm belief in God, or can they be atheists?
I think it situates my position, that I come from a position of having a faith story and having story of spirituality that is very important in my life. But then alongside that, respecting wherever the person is coming from, and recognizing often that perhaps struggles with spirituality or religion are often seated in stories and experiences that have perhaps been negative or hurtful. And so just kind of working with the stories, and is there space for a conversation about a faith, whatever the faith may be, or is there not? And that's okay. It's whatever is life-giving for the person that I'm seeing or in conversation with at any given time.
You've been doing this for many years. Would you say that most of us from that time who earned the title veteran, are we damaged goods inherently?
You know, Chris, I really don't believe so. I grew up in the conscription generation as well, and I think our young men and women, families, we were in a situation where there was political motivation behind some of the events that happened. But in journeying with people from all walks of life, I don't believe anybody is damaged. I kind of take the view that it's the things that happen, the trauma narratives, the experiences of war, of abuse, of trauma, kind of inform our stories, and we kind of live out of that space of being part of something. So I think for some people it's harder to almost integrate some of those trauma narratives back into their stories. I don't believe we're inherently damaged. No.
Okay, may I play the lawyer act here on you?
Mm,
May I ask you in reverse, Nikki,
mm,
is it possible for somebody to be healed to such an extent that he can live a normal life without anger issues and all sorts of other
mm,
horrible things?
mm, mm. I do. I think if somebody is intentional about acknowledging some of those, so something like anger for me might term that a dominant story in somebody's life, living out of a space of anger. So inviting somebody in that space to examine what is the history of the anger, where did the anger come from, when did it start? In what ways does it act out in your life? In what ways does it affect you, your relationships, the people around you? And then almost once that has been, the word we use is deconstructed, then it's for the person to say, well, okay, I actually understand it better now, and I understand its role in my life. And that kind of almost invites a choice in some way. Am I going to continue to live under this dominant story, or am I going to look at what I am more than the angry person, more than the trauma narratives? So all these kind of the labels that society likes to use, even the label of PTSD, sometimes I wonder whether it fits for everybody. Person living with a problem with alcohol, that person is more than the alcoholic label that person is given. There's a story of a father, a son, a brother, a colleague. There's so many more stories that could work to support almost marginalizing some of those problem stories. And for me, that's when healing happens.
As many of you know, I find myself now in Phuket in Thailand. These are great people. They're kind. Unlike the swine Swiss, who's not kind. So I want to ask you, because it actually struck me how kind these people really are, how respectful and just wonderful human beings. Do you think there's a lack of sympathy for the veterans in South Africa?
Mm, mm. In the experience that I've had in doing my research and working with veterans, I would say yes. And a lot of that has to do with politics again. The political dispensation, that's all changed from what we lived through as the conscription generation. So for me, the support, the wanting to hear the stories, without necessarily any political affiliation. These are stories of 18, 19-year-olds that were conscripted by our government at the time with a political ideology that they supported into life-changing experiences. And unfortunately, and even in some of the research I'm doing, it's likened to the Americans and how they treated their returning soldiers from Vietnam, and even now from Iran and Iraq, Afghanistan and Iraq. There's just not there's almost an indifference to what people have experienced.
That is a very good point. Because I recall coming back from the borders and no one would be even interested. They didn't care. The only difference was two things, no, three things. Once you had running water, then you had a toilet which flushed once you're back here. It was fantastic. And the light, you could switch the light on and off. It wasn't just like the generator's running and then it goes off. No. You could switch that on and off. And we changed. We changed from our camouflage police uniforms into our normal blue. And the last thing was the most dangerous of them all. You get from your Casper, which is a wonderful vehicle, but not that quick, into a Golf GTI or Ford XR6. And you had second gear, you already passed the fifth gear of a Casper. So it goes like a bat out of hell. But the point which struck me is that no one ever asked us, what happened, how are you feeling? Nothing like that. And when we started Legacy, we now have to admit that there is a lot of interest in that subject now. Otherwise, we would not have had all the views and the hours of being watched. So, forgive me for my long-winded way of explaining that, but you know, we get paid by the minute when you're in the legal profession. When these people talk to you, when these veterans talk to you, is there like a relief in them afterwards? Is there somebody who they can speak to?
I have experienced that. I also think that, and perhaps it's to do with age and experience, that being in our 40s and our 50s, there's almost we become more reflective on life in kind of in general, and a bit of a generalization. But I think it's not only the sharing of the stories, and for some people, and being kind of associated with a bit of a kopkrimper, you know, I've heard some of the stories of, and can believe some of the stories of being told how to get over things and how that's not relevant. So having somebody listen to the story and ask questions into the story, I think has been quite relieving for a lot of people. And I think that's almost the role that a lot of the veterans associations are playing as well. You know, one of the things that I've been really struck by is just how strong that brotherhood, the camaraderie element of the veterans associations plays, and recognizing that's also about sharing stories, you know, the importance of being heard. And I think for a long time, whether it was the political change in our country, kind of that signing of non-disclosure kind of agreements that the soldiers went into, there's been a lot of silence around what they did and what they saw. We weren't in Angola, so therefore you couldn't talk about being in Angola and those experiences. And there just really is a sense that that's starting to change now.
What is the one thing which we should not do? And if I may, for me, it would be to say to people, stay alone. Don't go out and see your mates, just sit there in your room and be angry. Is that the most wrong thing you can do, or is something else even worse?
I think it's dependent on everybody's individual stories. But I do think being alone and those stories kind of being still so present for some veterans and some people, it keeps that trauma story really very much prominent, in focus and alive. And talking about it and sharing it in a safe environment almost really does take it outside, and other people share similar stories, and so there's almost a sense of companionship in sharing it with a collective. I wasn't alone in some of my experiences and the way it's affected me. I'm not alone. There are others. And so that externalizing it, telling the stories, is really, really helpful.
Why are we so reluctant to speak to outsiders? What's wrong with us?
I wonder if it doesn't have to do with some veterans have told me that they can't speak to me because I wasn't there, so I won't understand. So there's definitely that element that I'm an outsider to their insider collective experiences, and that can be quite strong for people. And I also think it has to do with a lot of the secrecy around some of, you know, where the soldiers were and what they were experiencing and a part of, and definitely to do with the change in the country. It's almost as if our veterans are part of a what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of an illegitimate war. So there's a lot of victimization around being a white soldier, with some of the narrative that goes with the border war.
But let us say there's somebody here who actually do want to speak, who knows there's something wrong with him. I mean, I knew when I left the police, actually before I left the police, I knew I was not normal. And I'm still not. It took me 20 years to start using normal language. I was using the F word and all sorts of things all the time. I only stopped when my late wife, who was from the US Navy, she once looked at me like this and then she started using the same language, like only a drill sergeant can do. And I was so shocked. I was so shocked. And she said, well, that's how you talk to me. And then I decided right there and then I will not talk like that again. And I stopped that. But it took me 20 years before I could get that out of my system. We do have trust issues. I've got no doubt about it. I mean, for me to go and speak to somebody, I would be very reluctant to do it. So I have to ask you, is there some kind of patient privilege type of relationship with you if people start talking?
Absolutely. In terms of the confidentiality, very, very much so. So it would, although I'm not a secular psychologist, the ethics of the work is still vitally important, particularly in a church context where the taken for granted is, the church grapevine and how that works, but not so when it comes to issues of therapy. So it's almost a sacredness. Everybody's story it needs to be held in a sacredness, and so client patient confidentiality would work in exactly the same way. The only person who may share of their story outside of a conversation, I don't even call them sessions, I call them conversations, would be the person themselves. So I don't get to share without permission. And part of the way that I work is that I'm co-collaborating change with the person. So the individual has the agency to own their story, and what to do with that. And so everything works on permission. Would it be okay if we brought somebody else into this conversation, or what would you like? What is the benefit for you? So kind of centering the veteran is absolutely important, almost as the expert in their own narrative. So that's paramount.
So I think, if I may summarize, you say to me, this is privileged. What stays with you or comes to your knowledge stays with you. It's not, you people out there don't need to worry about this. It comes with a job.
That's right. And there might be instances like I'm doing research at the moment. So there's a document around confidentiality where I may use the veteran stories, and they need to almost sign to give me permission to use their name, to use their stories. And then in the way that the research works is once I've written some of their stories up, the veteran and myself will co-author. Is this a correct representation of what you said? Are there words I've used that you didn't? How would you like it to change? Would you like to add something? So it's a collaboration right from the start.
I'm going to ask you now, does this affect you? Because certainly legacy affects me and Fossey. We are very excited in doing it, but sometimes we say to ourselves, well, we've heard things now, not criminal things, actually, strangely enough. It's seldom that we hear that. But these people has gone through such emotions, we get slipped into that guy's life, and it's a privilege. It's a real privilege. But would this affect you on the long term?
I think it does. One of my mentors and my colleagues is Reverend Trevor Hudson, and he writes that everybody we encounter lives next to a pool of tears, their own pool of tears. And so I'm aware that I do as well. And if I might share that part of my research has taken me back to the border. I went back in July of this year with a group of veterans. And it touched me deeply because I think I've listened to stories of the border war, and the basic training experiences, and so many different stories. But one of the things that happened to me when I was up there was, for the first time, to almost really get a sense of what it was like to walk on that fine powdery sand in Angola, what it was like to sleep under the stars. And for goodness sake, I had a tent. I've never been camping before, so this was a first for me, and it was very basic camping. I could never really appreciate when my husband would tell me stories of, going 2 weeks without washing, and not having running water, and the rudimentary ablutions. And so I heard it, but being there was like this first-hand experience, and it really changed something for me. And the stories impact me deeply, because I kind of think I'm the mom of a 22-year-old who's been in the British Army for 3 years now. And I know how my mother's heartstrings tug at that. But to kind of experience what he's been experiencing and what my husband experienced, it just brings a different sense of being present to people's stories, of recognizing at 19 what some of the veterans were seeing and doing and expected to participate in. So it's almost like seeing some of the woundedness, the stories of woundedness, embracing them, taking them into myself, and almost just wanting to honor those stories. And I think that's part of the hope and the enjoyment I get in enjoyment. It's a bit of a contradiction, but it is an enjoyment in offering that safe space for people to tell these life-changing stories, and just where it's left them. So it's deeply, deeply meaningful. And yes, it does, not in a way that I think after doing this for 25 years, I've learned how to have my own supervision, take care of my own spiritual accompaniment needs. But the honor of kind of holding that tension of pain and hurt and dysfunction alongside joy and hope, and just celebrating how strong and resilient, despite some of the trauma narratives our border war conscription generation are. And that's a long way around to answer your question.
No, that's great. Thank you. The more you talk, the better. People are not yet to see me. They're going to complain soon. You'll see it. I'll blame you. But no, this is a conversation, and I'm fascinated by this. I love speaking to experts. Doesn't matter what kind of field, we can learn. Mm-hmm. So would you say then, if it's possible financially for a veteran to go back to where he experienced the trauma, under safe conditions, of course. I mean,
yes.
Don't want his kop to haak uit there or something goes wrong with him there. Is that a good thing? But should you strive to do this pilgrimage? Is that the word in English?
Yeah, pilgrimage, and I think it is a pilgrimage. So that got me interested in before I started doing my PhD research, was knowing some veterans who had gone back. My husband is one of them. He went back in 2009 and 2010. But knowing how some of the people's lives changed forever, how almost there was an ability to leave some of the trauma behind and come back changed. I don't want to use the word healed too frivolously, but come back changed, and how nightmares had stopped, and how the need to continue certain behavior changed. And I think experiencing that firsthand in July in Angola, and particularly with the Smokeshell veterans. So an example might be, and I'm sure they won't mind me sharing, because you've had conversations with both of them, but with Paul Lowe and HP Ferreira, going back to the site where their rattle came under attack for the first time in 42 years. And just kind of seeing the reverence around the site. I share how incredible it was for me that on that sort of rectangle of ground, nothing really grows, even today. So there's kind of this reverence of the space, watching them draw where people would have been sitting and where everybody would have been placed. And then the next day kind of having that remembrance service for, so although the veterans, the young soldiers that were killed in that on that day, on the 10th of June 1980, they never really honored those soldiers altogether in this on the soil where it happened, and just seeing how emotional it was for the veterans that were there, and almost a sense of some of them just seemed so much lighter when they left, and just recognizing that something significant happens in the safety of that environment, having other people to share those stories to, telling those stories around the fire at night. There was just something, and I still can't find the right words to describe what it was like, but really significant. And I do think, I think that for a lot of the veterans, the trauma narratives are still so much in the forefront of their memories. But going back, I don't want to be dismissive and say it normalizes, but it normalizes that life is carried on, that we do get to remember. We are the rememberers of lives that were lost and experiences that were had. And yes, and how healing that has been for some of the veterans.
Survivor's guilt. Do you get that often?
Yes, and I've spoken to a lot of veterans who kind of, they haven't necessarily named it survivor's guilt, but it's there, that awareness that I came home and my buddy didn't, the guy next to me didn't. And some of that, I think, is because the proper goodbyes were never really offered. So nowadays, we're very quick to say to somebody who experiences a trauma, you know, have you had any trauma debriefing? Have you gone for some trauma counseling? Whereas that wasn't available 42 plus on either side of that years ago. And so I think it was about the reacting in the immediacy of the, and kind of the emotions only really catch up with you much later, of what you saw, what you witnessed, your dead friend lying next to you, or yeah, so there is, but I think I wonder whether some of that doesn't have to do with the fact that there was never proper conversations around that, and the proper goodbyes, like the way we would do now, through funerals, and weren't really done because the soldiers themselves were moving on to the next encounter, the next operation, continuing with the work.
I remember in my time in the police, we had a serious problem in the police, and the problem was we never stopped fighting. You would go to the borders and you're in the border duties, and then you would come back home, you have these horrible criminals doing all sorts of horrible things, and then you were townships. And all encompassing were also the counter-terrorism things happening all the time. So you always continuously parade, if I can say it, use that word. And these young soldiers never got debriefed as such by psychologists, anything like that. They were just thrown into normal civilian life, but not even, because once a year they might have been called up, and then quickly they become soldiers again. Do you think that this system of being called up, or at least to have a possibility of being called up, did that play havoc with them or not?
It's hard to qualify either way, because people I've spoken to have said it did, and people I've spoken to have said it didn't. I've spoken to veterans who spent 2 years in operations, being operational in Namibia and Angola, and each time they were called up, they went back into more operations every single year for 10 years. And so we're part of the Smokeshells, and we're part of the Quito Carnivals, kind of on the other end of that. And so it's almost like constantly being in that heightened. They talk about the flight or fright response to trauma, and it's almost like being in that heightened sense of awareness that whole time. And so I do wonder, for myself, those that came back, how long did it take to kind of return to a sense of, okay, this is my normal life for another 10 months before I'm called up again. That roller coaster, what that roller coaster of emotions would have been like.
What would be the symptoms for somebody listening here now and thinking to himself, I may need some help? Would it be something like uncontrolled anger without reason, anxiety, nightmares, all sorts of things? What's the symptoms we should look out for?
And I think they're different for different people, but some of the common symptoms that are ascribed to PTSD and even to moral injury, which is what I'm interested in the difference, is and sometimes anger, outbursts of anger, anxiety levels, being triggered by those sounds and smells that would take them back into the trauma memories, the trauma responses that they would have had at the time. I think it is taking on habits to help people to cope. So whether it's alcohol, gambling, addiction to medication. So I do think there are some addictive behaviors that come as a result of not being able to deal with them in any other way. Silence and withdrawal. Some veterans I've spoken to say that on the anniversary of a particular date, they almost need to withdraw from family life because their thoughts and their memories are somewhere else. Lashing out at family members, domestic abuse for some. So almost any behavior that is part of this built up, not spoken about memories, trauma narratives that lashes out in ways that are either physical or addictive behaviors, or then the really for some people it's even withdrawing, like almost a hermit living, withdrawing from society, inability to maintain a healthy relationship. So those would definitely be some.
I do recognize a few in myself. By the grace of God, we're still here. Moral injury. What does that mean?
So some of the effects of moral injury, the physical effects are very similar to the PTSD. But moral injury particularly looks around the injury done to our morals and beliefs. Which also then creates anger and a lot of the similar responses. So, for example, one of the veterans I spoke to said that it was only after an encounter with Defiant, and when they were cleaning out the bunkers, that the one person discovered a Bible on Defiant's tafel. And he realized then for the first time that here I am, a Christian man with a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other, fighting somebody with the same kind of spiritual beliefs as me. And so that kind of causes moral an injury to our moral system. yeah, so that's also kind of a bit of a wondering for me, is for some of the veterans that society has labeled suffer from PTSD, how much of that is PTSD, or does that label really fit, or is some of that to do around morals and the role of the church in sanctioning the war in which they did? Yeah, so where does that leave somebody's image of God? What image of God do they have after they've been into battle, and perhaps in the line of duty killed somebody, or seen the atrocities of what a damaged and broken body looks like, and how that is almost an affront to their morals and values.
You know, that's very true. I was asked once, when do you become a man? And it's like, how long is a piece of rope? And there was even that song we know, you before us even. Rebecca always says, I stopped listening to music in 1985. So she's quite right. But I'm not interested in what came afterwards. But how many roads must a man walk before he's a man? And I found in my own life, it's when you see your own death. Up to when you don't really realize that you can die, because you're 18, 19 years old, you're strong as, you know, you're fit, you're even handsome, you know, you're well armed, you're well trained, you're going to kick ass. That's the movie's way. And then comes reality. And the reality is one hell of a shock, actually. I recall when I was shot at first, I wondered, why are you shooting at me? I don't even know you. And then I realized, but he doesn't need to know me. This is a war situation. You know, he wants to get out, and I want to prevent him, and I've got the uniform on which he doesn't like, and we see each other as enemies. So, do you often find people thinking about it in a deep way, in a thinking way, more than just on the scratching the surface? Do you get like the philosopher type of people also coming to you?
Yes, and I think that is sometimes where the wrestling with kind of religion comes in, or the wrestling with something like moral injury. I remember speaking to veterans in Angola when I was there, and how for some of them it was this, some of the soldiers were almost in the front line of an operation, and saw heavy action and gunfire, and their own fellow soldiers being killed and shot up around them. But then there were also the guys that would almost come in afterwards as almost part of the cleanup crew, that would also see the atrocities of broken bodies, and yes, so there is that I think there is a philosopher in all of us, I think, you know, wondering what is the meaning of life, what is the meaning of religion, what brought us to this point, what do we do with these experiences that we've had, what meaning, how do we make meaning going into the rest of our lives of this time in our history.
Do you have the answer for that?
For me, we make meaning through talking, you know, through unpacking it with somebody, through just engaging in those almost life-giving. Am I willing to be vulnerable? Am I willing to explore who I am with somebody else? What do I learn about myself? What do I learn about others? What do I learn about the world? So yeah.
Yes, I remember, you know, the old question, who decides who dies, which is a fascinating one. Rebecca says to me, my wife, she says to me always, she thinks that the South Africans are the most violent people she's ever met. That is after seeing one rugby game and a few other things. No, she's a peaceful person, very, very peaceful, totally the opposite of me. Point I'm trying to make is the South African male, that's a bit of a macho thing, you know, we don't easily admit we need help. So my theory is that just for the guy to pick up the phone or to write an email to you is a major step.
Absolutely.
And it should be encouraged.
Absolutely, and the gift with some of the technologies that we have at our at our hands these days is that it can be done on WhatsApp. So there doesn't have to be look me in my eyes and I can read your soul. You know, so it can be done on WhatsApp. It can be done on email. One of the if there is such a thing as a gift from COVID is that it has made us more aware of other opportunities to connect with people. So whether it's on Zoom, you know, a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment is on Zoom, Zoom sessions, Zoom conversations, WhatsApp video conversations, WhatsApp conversations where people don't want their faces to be seen. And there's still ways of connecting. There can be deep and meaningful connection just by having your voice heard, sharing your story, and somebody who's listening with intent to perhaps ask some helpful questions, some questions that might bring some meaning. And the great thing is as well is that it doesn't have to be 6 months of intensive therapy sessions. It can be a monthly thing. People connect with me after a couple of months just to check in, or I've been thinking about something we said, and it's, you know, so it just opens so many new possibilities for connecting with people. Like we're doing now. You're in Phuket and here I am in Kempton Park where it's pouring with rain.
Yeah, we're in the monsoon season, yeah, so we're expecting a lot of rain to come, but I can hear a thunderstorm in the background. It's fantastic to hear that.
It's a lovely
I
sound,
really
isn't it?
enjoyed it. Really great. But let us say, Nikki, that for some reason a female wife or a daughter or a child of a veteran, even a mom who's still alive,
Yeah.
are listening here and she thinks her son needs help. Now, this is a touchy subject. Can you force this guy to come and I'm not meaning in a legal sense of the word. Can he be forced to come if he doesn't want to?
No. And there are often situations where other people in our lives think that they know what's best for us. But even when I'm working with a teenager and the mom wants the child to come for therapy, it's then a case of, well, let you and I have the conversation. What are your concerns? What are the behaviors or the things that you're seeing that you're concerned about? Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your concerns. Let's talk about, do you understand some of the experiences that the person you're concerned about is going through? And I think that's where some of the moms, and I wondered that just as a mom of a soldier when I was in Angola, what it would be like for the moms and the dads of some of those soldiers to be able to stand on that soil. Would they understand things any differently? Would it make sense for them, meaning for them to be there? And the wives, I know that the wives who could have been girlfriends or wives at the time, living with somebody who might go away for 2 months every year and then come back really different, or came back from the 2 years conscription really different to the person that they knew beforehand. What was it like for them? What questions did they have? Because of the silence around so much that happened up on the border, are they aware of some of these experiences? You know, as I say, for myself, it was going back, even though Graham didn't come with me this time, I suddenly understood what it meant to walk patrols. I suddenly understood how the silence was quite unnerving because you weren't sure what was happening in that silence. I kind of understood what it was like to live rough. And so I think that's a thing for the wives and children as well, is what is it that has changed my person, my parent? What are the experiences that I actually don't even understand? And I think that's been quite sad for marriages in particular. South Africa has a high divorce rate anyway. 1 in 2 marriages ends in divorce. And and I know that for some of the veterans that has been a repetitive pattern as well. You know, why do you withdraw? Why do you get silent? Why do you lash out that way? It's that not understanding. So rather than forcing a loved one to come and have a conversation, it's almost like, let's start with you. You know, let's understand where you're at and what this is like for you. And you know, so there's that aspect as well.
I've received a very strange letter from somebody just last week. She's a professional woman. She's a doctor, actually, medical doctor. She's not in South Africa anymore. As a young girl, she wrote a Dear Johnny letter to a friend who was doing border service. He didn't die or anything, but she feels so guilty about it. Do you have anything to say to these other victims, which were not, wearing uniform, perhaps?
So I think the law of life is often that we do the best that we can with what we have and understand at any given time. And so writing a Dear Johnny may have made sense to her at the time, but it's almost that philosophical thinking going on there is like, what must it have been like for him to receive that? You know, that's kind of a sense maybe of where she's at, where her wondering is. But it's almost to acknowledge that this was the time we lived in. This was how a lot of relationships were conducted. Those longed for letters sent from home or from the border, redacted in places. And yes, we did the best that she did the best that she could at the time with the knowledge she had available to her. And if, you know, it's I'm sure he's moved on, and she has too. So yeah, to acknowledge it, but not to linger in that, in the guilt of that.
I want to invite all of you to come and tell us about the letters. Not necessarily Dear Johnny, because, you know, it's the funniest thing. There would always be this one guy who receives stacks of letters, man. He's like this week. He must do 100 push-ups before he gets even halfway through. And then there were people like me who never got any letter whatsoever. I think once from my mom, which is also fine. And there were all these little things right on it, sent with love and kisses and all sorts of
And the
things.
perfume. We used to
And the
spray the
perfume.
letters with perfume.
Well, that was 50 push-ups. I mean, if you receive like a perfumed letter, but I've seen some tough people, you know, in the police we were a bit older. We were perhaps more older than the national conscript. And you would see this sergeant of the police with his dog unit guy, so he's experienced, tough guy. And he would actually take his letter and then he walks away with his dog and the two of them sit there. And he got his arm around the dog, and now he's reading the letter here from a wife to the dog as well. It was the most touching thing to see. Of course, we just took a picture out of him. I mean, who does that now? But we really should make an episode on this, on how important those letters actually. So if you speak to these women, that would be fascinating. And all of you lads as well, you know, I want to know about this. Whether you still remember the push-ups and was it worth it? But I also have to ask.
And then there's another aspect, as you say, that those puckies from home, you know, what were some of the favorite things that you hoped would be in those puckies, and moms and girlfriends and wives preparing them to go up, you know, what was the significance of what went into them, those memories of food or.
Just yesterday I recorded a guy called Daniel Botwood. Now, Daniel was at Q2 Carnival. He must have been part of 6-1 Mech. He was 1-side and 4-side, rattle, 60mm mortar shooter. That's what he was. What a fascinating fellow, because he's totally English. And he has this wonderful way of talking. And at one stage I said something to him, but did you miss women or something, you know, there? Because he said, no, man, no. We were thinking of food. Food was the thing.
And there really is not only food because we're hungry, but food and the memories of childhood and family and dinners around the table, and you know, the food holds such significant memories for us. So it is interesting. when we were up in July, the moths from Windhoek actually packed us little puckies with confit, and there were some biscuits and different, a bottle of beer, but different things that would have been representative, I guess, of what would have gone in your pucky years ago.
Yes, it's true. You know, I think to myself, if we ever establish a Legacy Africa headquarters, I just want to tell you people here quickly that Phuket is not the end game for Rebecca and myself. We do want a place in Africa, probably an abundant fishing lodge or something, which we will rebuild, and we'll make it the Africa Legacy headquarters. We'll invite you people there. We'll have like a full dress ball, you know, that type of thing once a year, just to raise money, things for the veterans, not for ourselves. But I would like to also serve you, besides the vegan food, I would also like to serve you rat packs, and I want to see how you react to that. Because I was thinking now in the back of my mind, I remember the chili con carne and 3-2 battalion guys, they often speak about their rat packs we started exploding. Apparently, some genius, probably in a Vienna arrow or something, designed a tin with pop and sauce in it. But sadly, the chemicals didn't work in the heat of Angola, so they would walk in the next moment, it's like a contact, and they would go down, and they went, what the hell's going on? And then they realized the things are exploding in their rucksacks, machilas, or whatever they call it. I can imagine running away from that as well. So I'm looking forward to that. But do you think the South African tradition of having a braai, which is more than just food? I mean, let me tell the foreigners here, the South African braai is a byeenkoms. It's a gathering of people where you talk anything. Rugby, politics, not women because we're already there, but they're supposed to stand in the kitchen doing the salad, you know.
Right.
He's laughing here now, but it is something like that. For Afrikaans and English South Africans, even the locals, the black people too, they also have their braais. Do you think the braai is an inherent part, the integral part of therapy for these men?
I do. I think it's about the sharing of a meal. I also think it's the standing around a fire. You know, there's something very, very therapeutic about stories around a fire, campfire. So I do. Yes to that. Yeah.
I spoke to your people's commander, Roland de Vries. Fantastic man. Wonderful officer. There's nothing bad to say about Roland. But he does insist you don't call him General. And I kept calling him General until he plucked his mood and he told me not to. Now, is that a good or a bad thing, Nikki? Do you think there should still be a respect between the men with their old ranks? Or have we moved on past it now?
I'm in two minds because I think South Africans, perhaps particularly the Afrikaans culture, has always been so respectful of your elders. I mean, I still get called Tannie today, and I want to strip my mood and go, ek's nie jou tannie nie, but that happens, and it's about receiving that as a sign of respect. And so I think for a lot of the ranked soldiers as well, the ongoing calling them of general is a sign of respect. But I also understand that for a lot of them, it's about just now, that time in our lives is over. I'm now one of the guys. And I think, so I always start by calling somebody by their rank, and then see what they invite me to do differently. You know, I'd rather do that than just go in and call somebody by their name, and they, you know. So, but it is, and it's, South Africans are respectful in that regard.
Which is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with respect. I like respect. Wrong. You know, we sort of ooms and tannies ourselves now, you know. We got the grey hair. I can show you my chest hair. I don't have any other hair. Well, I've got a lot, but not on my head. How did you get involved with 61 Mech Veterans Association?
A lot of it started when I wanted to go back on a trip back to the border, And for me, other than COVID getting in the way, that should have been 2 years ago for the 40th anniversary of the Smokeshell Operation Skeptic. But then that came with starting to meet people, going to some of the military fairs at the Voortrekker Monument, and then really just the warm welcome of the veterans, and so people like Johan Boysen and Jaap Steen, and getting involved with them, and then really being invited back to memorials, to join them at memorials and parades at the military museum, and this, I think, by being in conversation and learning about their experiences was kind of a natural, well, come and listen to this, come and be part of that, come and join in this, and then of course after having met HP, and so kind of being on the border and seeing his wife Thea cleaning out his wound was really like it was a punch in the gut for me. It was, after 42 years, has this man not been through enough? And that got the conversation, Andrew and myself, just sort of saying, surely there's something we can do. And so then the thought was to start the Backer Buddy Fund through the Veterans Association, through 61 Veterans Association.
Yes, we want to urge all of you listening here, please support this fund. I mean, but tell us about HP. I mean, you came to Legacy actually through HP. I knew about you before. As I said, some people call you the angel of 61 Mech. I have a new name for you. I'll reveal it a bit later. Tell me about HP.
I think HP has to be one of the most courageous and inspirational people I've ever met. Not only through his own story of perseverance and his journey through pain and ongoing operations, but just his spirit. How he has such a strong belief in God. And I have to wonder, even as a Christ follower myself, like after 42 years of living in pain, where do you still, don't you question him? Don't you question your faith? And not only that, I went down to Bloem with Graham a couple of weekends ago to a Club Omatia gathering. And HP plays in 3 different orchestras. We went to listen to him play on the Friday afternoon, and he was playing in this one particular orchestra. And for him, it's a means of reaching out. It's a means that he creates or starts these orchestras to gather people who need to find somewhere to belong. And I look at the man and I just think his ministry to others just pours out of him. And yes, I think the physical space that he finds himself in, I think he has a long journey with pain, and I think that's one of the hopes that we have, is just that in this season of his life, he doesn't need to be walking around with pain and holes in his body, and yeah. But him and Fia as a team are such an inspiration to be around, and she nurses him. He is obviously her most prized patient and husband and friend, and her strength. There's an angel. There's an angel too. So incredibly inspirational people.
Indeed, they are. And I say again, if you people haven't seen that video, please have a look at it. And the one before, of Paulo, who was the platoon commander of HP that day. And you go even a bit further back to Rutherford, who won Gareth Rutherford, who won the Honoris Crux that day as the medic, as the Wolf's medic. He was also here on telling us about it.
And you've also had Marco Caforio and Calvin Luke sharing. They were also there on that day.
I remember listening to these people and I said, "Oh, wow, that must have been some of the best episodes we've ever had." It was a remarkable day. A lot of things happened there. A lot of people died, a lot of men, and we honor them.
Mm.
But how big is this wound in HP's back?
So the wound that he has at the moment is kind of that big, open at the base of his spine. He doesn't have a coccyx anymore because of the injury, and it's almost where that would have been is this hole, and so it really is a hole at the base of his spine. And I think quite a lot of damage has been done to his intestines, a lot of scar tissue as well, and still pieces of bone that are in that wound. Yeah. So Fia cares for him, cleans it out two, 3 times a day. But really something needs to be done.
I cannot agree more. Tell me, is HP the uitsondering? What's that in English? Are there many like exception? Thank you.
Yeah, I think there are, and I think Robert, we were speaking about him earlier. I think there is a group of men, whether the wounds are psychological or still physical, that are still reliant on kind of military veterans support, medical support, for lack of personal or private medical aid. And I'm not saying that they aren't receiving treatment, but I'm wondering whether the nature of some of their injuries doesn't require the best we have to offer.
We've been speaking now for more than an hour, and it went past us in 5 minutes. I know you're a busy woman. I have to ask you, in summary, what is the value of what you're doing to a veteran out here? If there's still a guy who's skeptical, what are we telling him? Why should he come to you and people like you?
So perhaps I could say that it's not so much the value of the work I'm doing, but the value of their stories, and the value of their lives, and how they were part of something really significant in the history of this country, whichever way we choose to write the history books going forward. And it's those stories that need to be told, and people like myself and others who really are just offering our space, our time to listen to them.
What are the chances that I know a lot of the veterans are very angry with God. Some of them are even atheists. It's not a good road to be on, but they're angry. What are the chances that you will then try to get him back into the church or something like that? Or are you not focusing on preaching as such?
No, I don't focus on preaching at all, and I'm certainly not an evangelist. And count amongst my personal group of friends, people from all faiths. I see the value in that. But what is helpful sometimes, I think, is to discuss the image of God, and to, when did the change happen? What was the image you had growing up? Young soldiers went into the army with a certain expectation, particularly if faith was a part of the cultural idea behind going into the military. How did that change? And so looking at the image of God, do you see God as a punishing Old Testament God, or is God a God who gave us free choice and free will, who almost stands alongside us as we make the decisions that we make, and who longs for a better life as well for those veterans? So it can be part of the conversation, but it's not a necessity.
Okay, no, that's a great answer, and I've asked the hard questions, and you answered it perfectly. Thank you for that. Because I know how you people think out there. We're skeptical people. We have to be. to survive. Internet, we've come to the end of this program. I did say to you I have a name for this woman. It's Emily Hophouse. And if you people don't know who's Emily Hophouse, besides being the submarine, go and find out. It's one of the greatest heroines we had for the Afrikaner, where English women came and assisted us during the Boer Wars with all the crimes which were committed against us there. The concentration camps, I myself lost people there. My wife Rebecca lost all her family in the Jewish ones. So we know what we're talking about. And I think also the time has come for us to reach out to each other. If you're sitting here or you know about somebody and you think you need help, even if you're not a 6-1 Mech Veteran, it doesn't matter. Please come. I'm going to leave Nicky's details here at the end. I'm going to leave HP's details where you can contribute financially with Back a Body. Also there in the description. Make a choice. Do the right thing. And until we meet again, God bless.